So we are at this point like months past when that triple auto for LeBron, KD, and Curry was technically released. The one of one non-autograph has been sold through Golden. That was probably like a week or two ago, I believe. But now we're seeing a little bit of speculation online about where is this card? Like, why has no one pulled it yet? And I mean, with 500,000 cards sold, like I think it could be one of two things. I think one is that potentially the person that has it either hasn't opened the card and they're looking to sell the pack. Like, I guess now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure you don't, if you get an autograph, it says autograph, but you don't know which autograph on the card. I'm fairly certain that's what they did with this. So there could be a chance that it's just in a pack still. The other scenario that I think is maybe, I don't know if it's more likely necessarily. Actually, I think there's a third scenario. So there's a third scenario that I'm going to bring up as the second scenario, is that somebody has the card and they are privately trying to auction it, or they're privately trying to get it sold, which I think in that scenario, I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't want to go to auction, but if I had to guess, if that's the route that they're going, there has to be some sort of NDA that maybe the auction houses have to abide by. That if they say that they have talked to the person with the card, like there would be repercussions for that. So I don't know. I think that's number two there, is that potentially they're trying to shop it around and they're trying to see what the best offer they can get is before they actually try and sell it through an auction. But they're also having people that they're discussing with sign an NDA, which in that scenario, I think it's more likely that they wouldn't be going to people saying they have this card. They would most likely be going to people saying they have a card that they want to sell, but they don't want to discuss what the card is. And if they want to even think about discussing it, then there have to be an NDA, which in that scenario, I guess I don't know how it really, like the info, you wouldn't really be able to say that, like you wouldn't, like no auction house would, because also the thing is the auction house, they want the commission from this. So it's like if they break the NDA or they do something where they sign some sort of NDA that says you can't say that we are discussing this card with you, they obviously want to get the commission from the sale. That's most likely that could be the second scenario. And these are all kind of hypotheticals, I think, because we don't know where the card is. And I've just been seeing a lot of people on social media, even Topps tweeting out like, where is the card? I think that's kind of interesting also. Like Topps put out a tweet earlier this week or last week that was essentially like the one of one is still out there. Like, who has it? Like, where is it? Like, in theory, they do know who has it and where it is because, or maybe they don't. Maybe, no, they must. There's no way that they don't know where the card is. Like, that's it. Then that's another reason why I potentially think that they know who has it is because they're going to do some sort of rollout. They're going to do some sort of a rollout with the card. I think the other scenario that would be, I don't know. I mean, if you're into sports cards, I think it's maybe going to be more rare that this could happen. But also with 588,000 copies sold of the card, there's maybe a chance that someone has it and they're just like, they don't know either they don't know exactly what they have. They just know that they bought this card. They don't have social media, so maybe they don't have the buzz. They don't know what the buzz is around this card. And I think with that many cards sold, I think that's actually a realistic scenario. Like if we're talking some random one of one or some card that isn't like as prestigious as this card, I think it would be less likely that the amount of sales would then lead to the amount of sales would lead to somebody not being public about having the card. No, sorry, other way around. They would be more public because that's really one of the only ways they would have seen it. Like this could be a card that somebody saw on some random like website that was promoting the card at the time, because they kind of, they put it out, and I'm sure Topps contacted, media outlets, and they talked about the card and what it was going to mean. So I do think that there is a scenario here where the person has the card and they aren't on social media. They don't have necessarily a way of telling people that they have the card, because it's like, if you're not on social media, in theory, this would be a good reason to make social media. Realistically, like, whoever has this card, if they don't have it, if they don't have social media, then they could, this is like an instantaneous, they could grow their social media account if they wanted to. Now, it could be that they don't want to. And I think that's a fine scenario. Like, that's kind of one of the things where it's like, if they don't want to publicize that they have the card, or they don't want to do any of these things, that's their choice, right? I think, again, now I'm sort of brainstorming a little bit here. I think maybe the fourth scenario could be that they don't want to make it public. They're somebody who spent, I don't know, let's just say maybe they spent $1 million. Maybe they spent a ton of money maybe they really spent a lot of money to try and get this card, and they wanted the card. Like, they weren't trying to get the card to sell it. They paid, however much, 500,000. So if there's 588,000, let's just say, I don't know, however much, like, and I'm using the term, I'm using $1 million as maybe a little bit of an exaggeration of how much somebody maybe would have spent on that card. But I think if you're somebody who's just like, I want this card, I don't care to have it publicized, I don't plan on selling it, maybe they just have the card, and maybe their friends and family know, but maybe they just don't want other people to know that they have the card. Because the other thing I think here too, and I know, again, sorry that I keep kind of coming up with scenarios, but the other thing here is, like, if you have this card, if you are somebody who isn't on social media, or you're maybe a private person, like, this card would bring you a lot of publicity. And if somebody doesn't want that publicity, then I don't think it's unrealistic that they are trying to go through a private sale to sell the card. So I think that these are all the scenarios of where this card potentially could be, and why we haven't seen it. Because, for another example, we saw the 1/1 Wembanyama, the non-auto 1/1 coming out of Topps Chrome. That's been pulled by somebody on Instagram, and then Topps reposted the video. So that's, obviously good that we saw that card, which, that is one thing that we do see on social nowadays, is we do see the publicity of cards, and we know that they exist. And I think it's a good thing that we know that these cards exist nowadays. But I don't know, this could just be, it could just be somebody, or, I guess maybe, or it's somebody who literally bought two, and they don't, like I said, they don't have social media. They don't have any of these things. So it's like, they just bought two and they got the card, and they're just like, this is cool. And maybe they don't even, like I said, if they don't have social media, they might not even know really what they have here. Like, I think it's hard to look at it and say, if you get the 1/1 triple auto with those three players, it's, you're probably doing a little bit of research. I would say it's probably unrealistic that you're not looking it up a little bit. But if somebody's on social media and somebody doesn't want the publicity, that is where I think that's one of the reasons why I think we don't know where this card potentially could be. Do I want to know who has the card? Do I want to know the price of the card? Yeah, I think it's probably pretty important. I don't necessarily know if the price of the card will do anything for the overall market, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, because the buzz around the card is so high, and because I think the sports card market in general is, still fairly strong. I mean, we have seen some decreases. Like, I think I saw Chris from Card Ladder. He was on, I think, the Sports Card Nonsense podcast, and he was talking about how a lot of the indexes that they're seeing, because they have like 25 indexes or something on different sports, different genres, different eras, and a lot of them are trending downwards, is what he was saying on the podcast. So, pricing going down, but I think the volume, in my opinion, is what's most important for cards, because I really think the price of cards and the volume of how many cards are selling those are much more correlated than then let's say like this card sells for whatever, $1 million or it sells for $2 million. Like I think that is a scenario there. And I wonder, I don't know. Maybe it's not a realistic possibility, but I kind of wonder, like, what if Topps wants to buy this card back? Like, what if they want to buy it and then sell it through Sotheby's or something along those lines? Like I said, it just for there to be this much buzz. I mean, it's very, and I don't think any of the Otani ones that sold in like the 600K. I don't think that card probably won't get shipped until after the season, like because you're going to want to get that on card, and I can't imagine you're asking. I mean, I guess they did ask Juan Soto. I don't know. So, like I said, I'm sort of brainstorming a little bit here, but it almost feels like you shouldn't be asking players that are in almost the World Series to be signing cards. Granted, they probably could, money talks. So realistically, that could be the scenario there. But one way or the other, I guess we may see this card. I mean, honestly, usually when I talk about these random things, the card ends up popping up. So since it's Monday, maybe this week we'll see the card finally, and maybe it just, I don't know, or it could just be like one of the, people from eBay bought it or something. I don't know. It's all speculation at this point, but it is a card that is important to the market, but I don't think is necessarily one that is going to be a catalyst towards prices increasing or decreasing one way or the other. All right, so to start the show here, I'm going to be talking about the WNBA Finals has wrapped up. The Liberty have won their first title in their franchise's history. They were the first WNBA franchise to be announced, I think, is what I was seeing. A couple things that I want to talk about with this specifically is, one, it's not really necessarily sports card related. It was just like annoying that I saw people online, like, which, again, I don't know why I even really take these opinions from online, but like the people who were like, it's the game 5 of the WNBA Finals. They showed like one clip of them like kind of fumbling around the ball, and it's like, it's just like, get out of your basement and go touch some grass, dude. Like it's really kind of pathetic, honestly. Like to see that type of narrative around the game, it's like it's just annoying. So it's really, again, it's one thing that if you see that, just ignore it. It's really just kind of, I didn't engage in any of these things, or I didn't even tweet about it. It's just like, grow up, The other thing is that this year we have seen an increase in WNBA products, which I think is a good thing. We're seeing the first off the line product from Select. That's good. And I think the rise in women's cards, I think, is going to be very important over the next few years. We see like another league, like the WHL, like the Women's Hockey League. That's a new league as of last year. I think there's 6 or 7 or 8 teams in that league, and they had their first season last year. And from all things, it seemed like it was pretty successful. We also have a Boston team coming into the Women's Professional Soccer League, which is very exciting. There was the Breakers a while back, which was the Women's Professional Soccer team, which, if I had to guess, due to some financial issues back, this was a while ago. This was probably like 10 years ago is when they weren't a thing, which they had they botched a little bit of their debut. Like they really, if you haven't seen some of the discourse around it, maybe go look. I don't know. I'm not sure. They just missed the mark. I think it was a fine concept, but I think the point of it, I see the point they're trying to make, but also at the same time, it's like, it was a little bit insensitive, I think, in a way. And I think that they have walked back the statement a little bit. But overall, we're seeing a rise in women's sports. And I think that is just going to mean a rise for women's sports cards, which I think is great for the hobby. I think it's great for the industry. I'm hoping that Topps can really step up here and maybe you partner with one of these other leagues or get the exclusive licensing for one of these other leagues. Like I know the Women's Professional Soccer League has a exclusive deal with, I believe it's Parkside Cards. They've been coming out with the women, that league, for a couple of years now. And I'm hoping that, I think it would be a great opportunity for Topps to really show and support these leagues because they're good leagues. Like this is kind of the interesting, I don't know, it's not necessarily interesting, but it's just like they're I think the narrative around it is maybe that they're not, but it's just like I don't know. It's a stupid argument that nowadays it's just like if you're angry at one of your family members, like you can just say that. Like you don't have to hate. You don't have to go online and hate on women's sports like some people do. But like I said, I think the rise in women's sports cards is going to be a good thing. And so, I mean, I guess I do have to kind of give Panini a little bit of props here because they brought back Prism in 2020. And ever since 2020, they've been kind of increasing the amount of products that they've done. And then this year is kind of culminating in like there was WNBA Origins, there's Select, there's obviously going to be Prism. Really cool. And I think it's going to be interesting with Caitlin Clark cards coming out. And I know this isn't about Caitlin Clark. It's about Sabrina Ionescu, who I believe if she hadn't gotten hurt, like I talked about on last week's episode, probably like Thursday or Friday, she would be just as popular as Caitlin Clark. I think if she hadn't gotten hurt, or if she had been playing in the era with Caitlin Clark, she would be just as big. Which again, Paige Beckers is a player at UConn who's going to be playing this year, and she has the opportunity to really take what Caitlin Clark did and bring it into another stratosphere. I think, and again, Paige Beckers would have been somebody who would have been neck and neck with Caitlin Clark in terms of popularity if she hadn't gotten hurt a couple seasons ago. Now she is going to be playing in college for this one last season, then is going to go pro next year. So I don't know who would have the first pick. It's obviously not going to be Indiana because they made the playoffs. But, whoever the lucky team is that gets Paige Beckers, I think is going to be really getting a good player on their hands. And I guess we'll see what happens this year with Topps if they do anything with Paige Beckers or how they approach her cards. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what they do there. The other topic that I want to talk about is basically just two topics. I think this is going to be the second one. And I have talked about this on previous episodes, but we had, unfortunately, another player who came out with out of this year's or last year's Bowman, with just one of, I don't want to say it's a bad auto, and I don't want to say it's a lazy autograph because I understand how many autographs these players are signing, especially early on in their career. And if they are a player who at a young age was like, was focusing on sports, there's probably a decent shot that they weren't really out here practicing their signature. So that I think that there's two scenarios there. I think that some of the things I've seen is people saying that they need to send these cards back and be like, you have to re-sign this card. I think we are in sort of I don't want to call it like a autograph bubble within the industry, but I think products have become so reliant on autographs that they have almost overexposed themselves to the point where they need players to sign so many autographs that it's almost unrealistic to ask those players to sign those cards. Like if you look at any of the players that were signing for Bowman or any of the players, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of cards. Like imagine signing your name 1,000 times. When you get to the end of those autographs, there's probably a shot you're not going to be wanting to sign any of these autographs, especially if you're a young player. Like, granted, these young players, this is kind of a piece of being a young player nowadays, at least, is signing these autographs. But I think overall, we're in a spot where it's like the industry is so reliant on the autograph that it almost puts the sports card companies in a tough spot because, like, on one hand, people want autographs. Like that is sort of the currency of a sports card box. Like that is like, if you're getting a box, you're expecting that you're going to get some sort of autograph out of the box, which I think is very fair. And I think is actually very realistic. And with some boxes, you're expecting 2, 3, 4, 5 autographs. And I think that's also realistic. I just think maybe it's a money problem with players signing. Like, sure, they're probably getting a decent contract, but like these players are not, some of the players, I would say, some of them probably know, some of them don't. But some of the players are just like, they're just going to do what their agency is telling them. Like, again, if you are a young player and you are signing with an agent and they're getting you these autograph deals, like, you probably don't, you don't have the best representation in terms of like knowing what is supposed to be in these contracts or what's in these deals. So I think on one hand, it's valid for people to argue about the autographs being not good. On the other hand, I understand how many they're signing. And I do think it can be tough to get a young kid at that age. I mean, I'm talking more mainly Bowman, but also rookie autographs for basketball. I mean, these are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Like, if I were to go back in time now, sure, I never had the opportunity to be a prospect of any sport necessarily. But like, if you were to tell me, hey, you got to sign 10,000 signatures, like that is a lot. That is a lot of work. Like, that's not just like, oh, we'll just do this in an afternoon. This is like maybe weeks of work. Like, and if you don't have an agent who is like on your case to get these autographs signed, like that's where the redemptions I think come in. And I think, if I'm going to be honest, I think Topps and Fanatics have done a fine job at getting redemptions out of products. I think obviously they're always going to exist because it's just like they need to, like, their deadline on these products is going to be more important than any one player's autographs. I think if you look at it, if it's like Bowman draft, for example, like they're probably pushing those players to get those autographs signed maybe a little bit harder than like, or if we're talking Bowman draft with like some of the top picks, if we're talking like a late round pick or a player who, isn't as important necessarily, that's where they maybe aren't pushing back as much. But I think I see the argument that people want good autos in these products, but on the other hand, these are just kids, and it's like we're expecting, like we're in some scenarios, these are even kids that are younger that are the Bowman autos. Like if you're talking Bowman auto versus like a rookie Prism autograph, like those players at least have been through, they were at college for at least 1 year in most scenarios. But if you are getting your Bowman autographs and you're collecting of this 17, 17, 18-year-old, like it's probably a lot tougher to get them to sign these autos because they may not even know like how to sign them. Or it could just be that they're just doing it for the money, which I mean, I'm going to be honest here. Fine. That's, I think for a long time in this industry, autos and things having to do with players, they have not been compensated enough for these things. And now that we're seeing the dramatic increase in the profits of these sports card companies, I do think it would be in their best interest to reinvest in the players and reinvest in making sure the products are good and that they're not just putting out junk and raising the price and just adding more commas and zeros to their bottom line. It's going to be important for them in the next few years to invest a lot of that money back into the players and figure out a way to make sure the sports card collector is really getting the experience and the cards that they deserve because they're paying for them out of a lot of these products. Now, this shouldn't be that much of a surprise, honestly, just based on what we've seen within the industry and what we've seen Panini do over the past, 3 or 4 years, because I think that's really when we started to see Panini take a turn and lean into putting out the products that they know are popular within sports cards, but also it feels like I don't know. This is maybe a conversation I've had a few times here on the show, but it just really is. It blows my mind that Panini did this. And I mean, I'll just, I'll go right off the top here. And this is not going to be super surprising to people. I think a lot of people have probably seen this chart. So Lameme James, who phenomenal meme account within sports cards, also, very knowledgeable on the industry. If I'm going to be completely honest, they put out a lot of good stuff. They put out a graph, which this graph is also, I think it was the Kabooms that they did this with Lameme James did this with as well. But so the downtowns, the Donruss downtowns, they went from a total of 381 cards with one autograph to in 2023, which I guess would be this. Yeah, it would be this year's. No. Well, 2023. They put out 2023, which, so maybe the data for 2024 isn't out necessarily because, we've seen sort of a controversy with some of the downtowns with like this year's rookie class because they did the whole thing with like Costco where they put like the oversized in there. And again, I saw another interesting post. I think it was actually Brian Gray from Leaf, previously from Leaf, not there anymore. But he put out a tweet that was like, which card do you think is going to get more returns on it? And he compared that downtown, the oversized downtown, to when Topps did that horrible set in like Series 1 or Series 2 of last year with like the through the years, those like fake autographs that were basically just a card of a card. Like it was, you could tell kind of that these cards were just inserts and they weren't the actual real autograph cards, but they put the Bowman Chrome or like the first Bowman of of like Mike Trout in there. And, I think that's a phenomenal point. That I don't know. And I've talked about the which card's going to be more returned. Like, I don't really know here, but it's a controversy that Panini has just been like, they're taking the most popular things and they're just keep putting them out into the world and saying, here is as many of these things as you want. And unfortunately, I think if you are not somebody who is in tune to social media and the media aspect of cards, like you probably don't even see. I mean, other than maybe you have you've bought packs and you're just not getting as good of a return. Or I don't know. It's annoying to me, and it's really kind of a little bit flabbergasting. So the 2023 Donruss or the 2023 Donruss Downtowns went up to over 9,000 cards and 15 autograph cards. Obviously such a tremendous upgrade there. And I think to the last point that I didn't finish there was that if you are a buyer of sports cards, I would say a majority of people are probably on social media, but there's probably a decent amount of people who are not on social media. So like if you are just buying these products and expecting to get good cards or expecting to get a certain thing that's coming out of these, like if you are not buying cards to then sell them, sure, you're probably not super upset when you don't pull some crazy stuff, maybe as you had over the past few years. But I think what you are going to see is that people on social media, people in the know here, they have seen what Panini has decided to do. And they have seen that Panini, like I said, has just decided that they're going to take everything that was good about cards, everything that people liked about cards, and they're just going to mass produce them. And I really don't want to say it's a scam or that they're rug pulling, but it's like they went like, why didn't I almost wish that they could have just came out with a new product potentially, and rather than increasing the production of these cards or increasing the production of these good products, is to just come out with more products, I guess. And that almost seems maybe a little bit contradictory to like things that I've talked about with, I think that they should be not expanding the brands, but like they should be compressing the amount of brands they have. And I don't know. It's annoying. It seems like it's almost like a slap in the face, if I'm going to be honest, to collectors here, to just increase the production of the thing that everybody likes so much. And I think ultimately the point here is that the downtown is not going to be, it's not going to be as important as it once was. And I think that something is going to replace that downtown, and something that, I don't think that there's going to be a thing that is like downtown that there's only 380 cards of like there was in this 2018, but there is something that is going to replace the things that were once popular within the hobby. I don't know necessarily what they are off the top of my head as I'm talking on this show, but like they are taking the things that people like and just expanding them and making more of it. And I don't think that's, I wish that they wouldn't do that. Like that's maybe a me thing. I think that is the sentiment I think I've seen around the hobby as well. When I see people talking about cards and I see people talking about the industry, I think I would say it's a sentiment that's pretty widely considered. I mean, on social media for sure, but like off social media, obviously there's no way to really gauge that. But I think the reason those things were popular, for example, the downtowns, the reason they were popular is because they were hard to get. The reason why Select was so popular was because it was hard to find. You couldn't just go to Costco and get an a whatever this mega box thing that they did. You can't and now they're adding all these different configurations. It's like, why are we making things more complicated than they have to be? Like, why do we have to make things like before? It really was pretty simple. It was like you had retail, and there was like maybe one or two different SKUs within retail. There was like packs, and then there was maybe hangers, and then there was blaster boxes, and then there was hobby boxes, and sure, maybe there was two or three different configurations of hobby boxes. But now it's like, if you go to, there are 10 different retail things you could buy of Donruss. And like I said, the thing that made Downtowns so popular was that they were hard to find, was that they were more rare. And I think that is going to be replaced by something that I don't know what it would be now, because I think we've seen such a high increase in these different cards or in these different inserts that they have that, maybe it's something that's right in front of our eyes, and maybe it's something that is very easy to point out. Like, just look at the more popular products and see what these inserts are, and see what these cards could be. If you were maybe looking for the next Downtown, like, I'm not sitting here again predicting what the next Downtown or the next Kaboom is going to be, but I think ultimately it's going to come down to, there will be something that's going to replace these, and I think in the next few years. Like, because ultimately when these things happen within sports cards, we don't know that the thing is going to become the thing until it does, if that makes sense. Like, no one really was like the Downtowns. I'm sure there probably was people that did this, but like the majority of the industry was not looking at Downtowns at the time and saying, this is going to be the card that everybody is going to want to collect. Like, and again, I think it just comes down to, we don't know what we don't know yet. Like, I don't, like, maybe it's something that I'll do a little bit more research on, maybe, and potentially, maybe be able to point out and maybe help some people find this next card. But it's like, I also don't even want to make that prediction, because to make the prediction that something's going to be the next Kaboom or the next Downtown is like, nah, it's hard. It would be hard to do. Like, I don't think it's necessarily even something that I could do right away, realistically, because I think it's going to take like a decent amount of research to figure out which of these cards could take the place of these. But that's what I think ultimately is going to happen here. Ultimately, the Downtown, it's just going to become another card. I think there will be years, 2018, 2019, maybe even 2020. I think it's similar to what happened with Prism. Like, if you look at Prism throughout the years, and you look at the grading, and you look at how many of these cards are graded, you can see a massive jump from from 2017 to 2018. Maybe there's going to be a similar jump. There's probably a similar jump with these Downtowns at some point, probably like 2021 or 2022 potentially. But ultimately, Prism still is one of the more popular products, but there was that super increase that, like, there is going to be probably a large increase with these cards as well. And maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the first year that they're really doing the big increase. But I think ultimately, if you're in this industry and you are, I don't know, speculating on certain products, or you're speculating on certain cards, I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say the Kabooms and the Downtowns are not going to be the cards that you should be speculating on if you're looking to either prospect or, buy a card that you think in a few years is still going to be rare and will go up, because just based on these numbers, unfortunately, the Kabooms and the Downtowns, they're just not rare anymore, which is, I think, kind of unfortunate for the industry. So the not a one of one. I'm so used to talking about cards specifically, but the Ohtani 50th home run ball sold right ahead of the World Series, which I think I'm going to cover World Series stuff probably on tomorrow's episode, because that's when the games start. I think Friday night is the first game. But the Ohtani baseball has sold through Golden Auctions for $4.4 million. Now, that is not the highest piece of sports memorabilia of all time, but it is the highest piece of, or not piece, it is the highest baseball sold of all time. The other baseballs, as you probably remember, there was the Mark McGwire baseball. That one sold for $3 million, which that one is very similar to this baseball because that one sold like 100 days after. So I think I guess that would have been like right after the World Series, I'm guessing, or in like December or November at some point. This one, I mean, perfect timing for the Ohtani ball, which is why I'm going to talk about some of that in a little bit. But then there's also the Babe Ruth 1933 World Series home run ball that sold for $805,000. And then number 3 is the Barry Bonds 765th home run ball in 2007 that sold for $752,000. And now we have a new record. This one's selling for 4.4. Obviously, there's the opportunity cost here. I mean, I don't really even have to. It's interesting because the opportunity cost here is almost like you're almost taking a risk also, because those other baseballs, if hypothetically any of those other baseballs were to come back for sale, I could see them having a pretty high likelihood that one of them would be higher than this. Just based on like 50-50 is obviously a very impressive season for Ohtani. But like when he came into the league, he's breaking records. He broke records that Babe Ruth held for when he was a pitcher and a hitter. Now he's not only a pitcher. Now he actually doesn't even hit. Now he doesn't even play the field either. He's just a hitter. So like, who knows what is going to happen here with Ohtani's career? So like I was saying, with the opportunity cost, you're almost taking a risk by buying this baseball at this price, because like next year, for example, what if he goes out and he hits 60 home runs? Or what if he somehow breaks the home run record, which I don't know if that would be. I think he would have to hit like 50 or 60 home runs every single year for like the rest of his career to break that. But I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily out of the realm of possibility that he could break the home run record in the single season. So like there are so many, he's as much as Ohtani at this point is a veteran and has been in the league for so long, he's also like played not that many seasons in the MLB. Now he did obviously have almost a full career. So he's not like a young player by any means. Like he played almost a full career in Japan before coming over here to the States, and makes his debut 2018, obviously playing for the Angels. And also I wrote an article about this too, kind of in for Sports Illustrated. I don't know if you're listening to this podcast, I also write for Sports Illustrated. So if you go to Twitter and you go to, I believe it's SI Collects, or it's just si.com/collects. My article should probably be up there still. I'm not 100% sure. I know, with new articles going up every pretty frequently, I don't know 100% if it's still going to be there. But I think the opportunity cost for this is a little risky. Ohtani, I guess I don't know necessarily if he will have a better season than this. I mean, if he wins a World Series, like, that's kind of my other thing here with Ohtani just in general. If we're looking from like a sports card perspective also, is like, if Ohtani wins a World Series, does he just basically become Mahomes? And it's like his ceiling is going to jump up super significantly. No, the floor is going to jump up super significantly, but the ceiling will pretty much stay pretty much intact. Like you're not going to see the fluctuation that you do with some players in other sports. Like with Mahomes, for example, sure, his rookie cards have kind of fluctuated a little bit. And if you look throughout like the playoffs and throughout the off season, sure, you're going to see some increases and decreases in price. But like for the most part, Mahomes is pretty much steady in terms of what his price is going to be for the rest of his career. Now, sure, if he goes on and breaks Tom Brady's record, I mean, Mahomes is another example of a player who is, although he has not played in that many years, he has still like a veteran and still won, multiple Super Bowls. So if Ohtani can win his first this season, I think that also makes his card prices pretty steady. I mean, unless he goes on to play like unless he goes on and does something like Mike Trout did, unfortunately. And that's kind of the other piece of this the other piece of this conversation here is like, if you look at Mike Trout, he was supposed to be the face of the league. And for quite some time he was. And then he got a little bit in, he's been injury prone, hasn't really, I'm fairly sure he's never played in the playoffs, which is like insane. And I don't know. I mean, if he can go somewhere and win a World Series, that would be great for Trout. I think that would be really great for the league in general. If like the face of, and he would also have to be kind of like a good player too. I think if he's just on a team and he's, if he's like a bench player on a team eventually one day and they win the World Series and he's not really the star player, I don't know if the World Series necessarily matters as much as like, with this World Series with Ohtani, like he's probably going to be one of the best players in the World Series here. Like the Dodgers are also insanely stacked, which is crazy. But I think if Trout hadn't gotten hurt and if he just, hadn't signed like a 12-year deal with the Angels, like it really is quite a shame that Trout has what has transpired over the past few years with Trout, considering he was coming off of like multiple MVPs, great seasons, like could never, the Angels could never really put it together and do well in the playoffs whatsoever, even if they because this was, no, actually, maybe it wasn't, or maybe early on in his career, Trout must have, because Ohtani played there for 5 years up until this year, and he played in his first playoff game this year, and he hit a home run, because of course he did. But like I said, the article that I put together on SI is kind of the point of it is like, if any of these other baseballs had sold in that time, in now, if they were to sell now, I think that they probably would be higher than this 4.4. I think at the time, the $3 million for, like, I think to put into retrospect how crazy that $3 million sale on that Mark McGwire home run ball was. That's like if this Ohtani ball had sold for $10 million. I think if we're really kind of looking at like, just not even inflation, but just looking at like the memorabilia market and what has happened to the memorabilia market. I mean, obviously we've seen tons of crazy jerseys. We saw another $1 million jersey, the LeBron James jersey from the Chosen One cover. That one sold for over $1 million probably about a month ago. And then just in this past couple of years, we've seen like the Maradona Hand of God jersey. We've seen Kobe jerseys. We've seen Jordan jerseys from the finals that have sold for over $1 million. So sports memorabilia right now is definitely going through an era where in 10 years, I do wonder if we're going to look back at a lot of these prices and if we're going to look back on it and say, wow, those were pretty high, or if we're going to look back on it the same way we look at sports cards right now and we look at the sports card sales of 2018, 2019, and we're going to say, wow, those were extremely low. Like, I think that this ball, for example, will probably always be one of the highest, if not the highest. Like, I'm just not 100% sure, unless it's an Ohtani ball, unless someone hits like 80 home runs or like someone breaks the home run record. Like, I just can't see any ball breaking this record. And I also wonder if this ball had sold in a similar time frame as the McGwire ball, like a little bit longer from when it was hit. And if like Ohtani wasn't playing in potentially one of the best World Series of all time, like if Ohtani wasn't playing for the Dodgers going up against the Yankees in the World Series, like does this ball have the staying power to go above this $4 million price tag? I don't know, because like I said, I think hype and I think the perfect storm of factors here really led to this $4.4 million price tag. And in theory, because I like the industry and I want the industry to thrive, I would hope that it would still be in the $1 million. But if I'm going to be honest, if it's in the $4 million, and it went up like, I think it went up 2 million in the last day also. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see I don't think this ball will ever sell again, really. Like, unless Otani somehow hits another crazy ball or something like that. I don't know. But overall, it's a crazy piece of memorabilia. And I hope that it's going to a home where they are going to share the ability to see the ball potentially. Like, I hope that it goes somewhere that they don't just keep it in their like I don't know, their like closet or something. I can't imagine that would be the case. It's probably going to be on display somewhere. But with the $4 million price tag, you do hope that this ball can be seen somehow by others, whether it's through the Hall of Fame or through some sort of ceremony or something like that. But for now, the ball has sold officially $4.4 million for the 50th home run ball. The bulk of this episode is going to be about the World Series because we are hours away. I don't know, depending on when you're listening to this, to the start of game one. I believe it's an 8 o'clock start time for game one between the Yankees and the Dodgers. This is probably going to be the most, I don't know, I think it's probably the most stars we've seen in a World Series in quite some time. We have two of the biggest teams, I would say, and the biggest teams in terms of like, I think that the Yankees and the Dodgers probably have the most amount of like superstars. And I think I just said that. But the other thing that I did want to talking about superstars is, well, one superstar, one Nepo baby. But Topps announced that they're going to do a Bronny James, LeBron James, one of one, probably another Topps Now card. I would imagine this will be a Topps. What is a Topps Now card? But I don't know if they're doing like the same thing that they had been doing over these past few months, where everybody had the you could buy like the base card. And then you had a chance at the one of one. They only announced that they're gonna have the Topps Now one of one, which, first time of two active players on a Topps Now card, or a father and son duo on a Topps Now card of two active players, which, I mean, that should be pretty obvious because the only really other time something like this has happened is Griffey Jr. and Griffey Sr., which I don't know. I mean, I'm over the Bronny James hype. I'm not, I don't know. I understand that LeBron is like the best player of all time, or the best player of this generation. I think Jordan is the best player of all time, in my opinion. Even though I've grown up watching LeBron, but being that he's from the East, like, I don't know. It's hard for me to really say that he's the best player of all time when Jordan, I don't know, whatever. And also, as a Celtics fan, they played against LeBron, so maybe there's a little bit more hatred there. But I don't know. Something about the LeBron being on the starting team and then actually playing in the first game is like, it's stupid. I don't know. It's annoying. And again, maybe this is me being a little bit biased here because I'm a sports fan and I'm allowed to be biased. I think it's unfortunate that I guess on one hand, it's unfortunate he's taking the spot of somebody who could be on the actual team. But at the same time, I'm also like, well, he realistically will be the 12th or 11th or 10th man off the bench. So it's like, who's he really taking the spot from? So whatever. But there's going to be a Topps Now, and it's the first. They said it's the first ever pro basketball card with a father and son duo. Yeah, obviously. And the card obviously not going to be licensed, which I think if this is the design they're going to use, I think it's a pretty good design. I mean, I think that they, again, are using good photos that will that it's harder to necessarily tell that it's going to be a non-licensed card. I mean, they're just using LeBron's face and then a shot of LeBron James Jr.'s the back of his jersey. So either way, there's that. And then we have the World Series, which, like I said, two of the teams that I think have the most stars on them in quite some time. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Juan Soto this offseason. I know a lot of people are pitching that they should just pay him, which I think if you're the Yankees, I don't know, you probably just should. You're the Yankees. Like, this is what the Yankees are. The Yankees are supposed to sign players like this to these high contracts. Now, with George Steinbrenner obviously not being part of the team for obvious reasons, the ownership changing a little bit, you can see why maybe they're not doing that as much. But I don't know. Juan Soto, he probably has like 3 or 4 more years of being in the prime of his career. So just sign him to the contract. You're the Yankees. You should be out here signing these players. But Topps, probably like last week or earlier this week. Let's actually wait. No, it was on the 21st. So that would have been Monday. Then he put out the card sales of the highest price card sales of players that are playing in this World Series, which I did see some people talking about, like, why is Topps talking about prices on the secondary market? Like, I don't know. It seems kind of interesting that they're deciding to do that. But the two highest are, or at least for the respectively, you got Shohei Ohtani, $336K, which was the card that sold from the Sotheby's auction, which right now might not be his most expensive card, because when I was looking into this, I wrote an article for SI. I know I talked about SI on the last podcast, but I wrote an article for SI about this specific topic, and I was looking into Shohei Ohtani prices, and there was a card that sold on eBay for $350K. Now, that was a Topps Dynasty rookie auto. $350K actually sold on the 15th of October. So I don't know when this tweet was put together, and I don't know, like, because this was the interesting thing. I was like, why did they not put that in the tweet? Why did they not put a higher number? I'm assuming it was probably something that they put together like weeks ago, or like when the teams were announced. So I don't know. It was just interesting that they didn't. Which then you have Aaron Judge, $324K, and then they have Anthony Volpe at $150K. And then Mookie Betts at $123K, which the Volpe was actually not even his superfractor Bowman auto. It was a number 2. It was a PSA 10, which is, I believe it's a pop 1 of the 1 of 5, the red 1 of 5 Bowman autograph. So, like I said, it is a pop 1, because if you look at any of the other PSA 10s, there aren't any other PSA 10s. I'm going to skip the next one because it was the 2 pitchers that weren't very high. But then you had Juan Soto, who had $300K. And he obviously has, and these are some of the things I talked about in the article, but he had the interesting, the 1-of-1 superfractor of his got, the auto got altered and then got regraded by PSA. It was originally in a it was originally in a BGS slab. The auto was altered, and then PSA graded it again. Kind of, I don't know, pretty interesting that they would do that, which then, the story goes that they then bought the card, essentially. They took it off the market, which is very smart of them. I don't know. I wish that there was a way that they could reissue this card into the market, but, obviously, I don't know. I don't think that's a realistic possibility at this point. And then you have the Jason Dominguez, who he'll be playing, and he had a $474,000 card, and that is his 1-of-1 superfractor that sold back in, I think it was 2021. So, right at the height of when the sports card market was kind of going crazy. So he had his 1-of-1 sell for that price. And, I don't know. There's something interesting here, like with prospect cards. Like, I wonder if we are just in an era when prospect cards are just going to always be more than players in the league. Like Mookie Betts, for example. Why is the Mookie Betts 1-of-1 not also $400K? Like, why are people out here buying a card like Jason Dominguez for $400K when it's like, if you you could probably buy all 5 of the Mookie Betts, one of, the number to 5 red auto from Bowman. You could probably even buy the superfractor for Mookie Betts and then multiple red autos. Like, it just doesn't, I don't know. It'll never make sense to me, and I don't really know why the market is the way that it is from this perspective. It is always the next shiny thing that the market always wants. But to me, it's like, why spend the money on a player like Dominguez at the time who, luckily he is playing in the majors. But it's like, why not spend the money on a player that is like a superstar, like Mookie Betts, for example. Now, you could say that also, you could also look at it and say, well, what about Mike Trout? We talked about that a little bit on yesterday's podcast with like the Mike Trout card, the 1 of 1 superfractor, that one, people could look at it and say, well, that one clearly has probably lost, that one's probably lost a decent amount of value. So it's like, what is really the best cards to buy and I think there's an argument I think you could make for, I guess you could make the argument for prospects, but like I would only be making the argument for prospects if you're not paying $400,000 for the card. Like that's really the only circumstances where I would sit here and say, yeah, prospects, that's a good card to buy. Like if you are prospecting, you really, in my opinion, you want to be looking at players that people don't know and buying cards there. Like buying cards of players who are making their way up the ranks. I don't know. I just don't see how. I don't know. It's just it'll never make sense to me. It'll never make sense why people want to spend the money on those cards, but they do, and that's just the case. That's just the scenario. That's the case of it. I don't see it ever changing, similar to other opinions that I've had about sports cards, and I don't see why. For example, like I don't think it'll ever change that the first card that sells of a player is always the highest, even though there are the most of those cards in theory being sold at that time. And if you just wait 2 weeks, you can get the card for half of the price, sometimes a quarter of the price. It'll never make sense to me why people want to spend their money in sports cards the way that they do. And I'd be very interested to think and to know like why people would go down that route and how much money has really been lost from people buying cards that way. Like, what is the overall net loss of people buying cards of prospects or not buying prospects really, but buying cards, buying the first card, being the first person to own the card? Why would they do that? Versus why would they just not wait? Like, how much money is being lost from that perspective?